So, here is a short presentation as an orientation of the financial support available in Sweden mainly, but also a little bit about funding available within the Nordic countries as well as internationally. Like I said, this will be basically about the Swedish foundation or financial support system, but I hope that the ones of you that do not live in Sweden can also find it useful. Maybe it's transferable to the way things works in your country. So, like I said, this is a very brief orientation, so if you want more information, you should check the different websites of these organizations. So what we will be looking at is an overview of the funding available in Sweden. We will start with ones that run under the kind of governmental support that is available for cultural workers. We will also just look into the regional support available, some of the bigger foundations in Sweden. I will also go through a little shortly the Nordic and European support that might be worth mentioning, as well as some other international support. And in the end, I want to give you some tips and tricks and what to think about when you apply for money. And before we dig into the different funding possibilities, I would just like you to look at the cultural politics, the cultural politic goals in Sweden. These were decided by the Swedish Parliament in 2009, and in a way they control the Swedish state cultural politics. And this means that a lot of money that you can apply for in Sweden comes, of course, from the government, and these goals are there to guide the Swedish, both the state and the regional and the local cultural politics. So this means that it's important for you to know about these, I think, when you apply for money. And the goals are, of course, also a guidelines for other foundations in Sweden that sponsors culture. So I put the goals here both in the Swedish and an English translation so that all of you can understand it. And basically it says that our national cultural policy should be dynamic and challenging and unbound with a freedom of speech as foundation. It emphasizes that everyone should have possibility to participate in cultural life, and that creativity, diversity and artistic quality should form the development of our society. And then you have the specified goals here, which is that our cultural life or our cultural politics should encourage everybody's possibility to experience culture, education, and also to develop their own creativity. It promotes, of course, artistic quality, but also innovation. And it also lifts up the importance of a vivid cultural heritage that is both preserved and used, but also under development. It promotes international and intercultural exchange and cooperation, and it should especially pay attention to children and young people and their right to culture. So, starting with the bigger governmental fund, let's look at the Arts Council, Kulturrådet, and their funding in music. The Arts Council in Sweden is running directly under the Ministry of Culture, and they are following up on the cultural political goals of Sweden. One of their missions and their tasks are to distribute the different governmental grants that are available within culture. They spread knowledge about Swedish culture and also give funding. So below here you can see a list of some of the things that Kulturrådet does. The first one, the business and development grants to regions and their institutions and actors, the cultural collaboration model, or Kultursamverkansmodellen as it's called in Swedish, is the way that the Swedish governmental cultural money reaches to the regions. So basically, Kulturrådet are distributing the money from the government to the regions and communities and to their local cultural activities that they do. The Kulturrådet also gives support to free music groups in form of activity or tour contributions. I will go back to these in a moment. If you are an organizer, an arrangeur within the field of music, you can apply for support for your work, for your business. You can apply for money to collaborate with composers, and you can also apply for money if you want to make a recording. The Arts Council supports some specific actors of very specific cultural political interest, as well as a few organizations mentioned here as the Music Alliance, Musikalliansen, and Musikcenter. So let's back to the two parts here, which I've put in bold, which I think might be the most useful for you right now. So the contributions you can apply for as a free music group is the activity support and the tour support. So if you are a music group, a free music group, an unemployed music group, you can apply for support for your work, and this grant is there to support your work in terms that more people in Sweden can take part of your music performances, of varied music performances of very high quality. It also gives you the opportunity to make international cultural exchanges. If you apply for the tour support, of course, you apply for it to be able to make tours in Sweden or abroad. And here you have to be music group with organization number, you have to be professional, and you have to work regularly in Sweden. So the activity support can be for different kinds of production costs, for instance. It cannot be used for salaries, and if you apply for this money, you have to have some kind of co-funding. The same goes actually for the tour support. Also here you have to be a professional free music group, and you have to be a legal body. You have to have an organization number, and here you can apply for money that is related to tour costs like travels and accommodation, etc. Also, you might be an organizer of concerts. That's not, it's very common that you are, as a musician, you also organize concerts, of course. So here it's a possibility to apply for organizers support, arrangörsstöd. Applications will be looked on by a reference group with very high quality, high competence. And they will look at, for instance, things like artistic quality, of course, renewal, innovation, development, but also the distribution of your concerts or your work to the country and to the Swedish audiences. And this goes, I would say, for all the three bigger governmental funding bodies. Let's move on and have a look at the Swedish Arts Grant Committee, Konstnärsnämnden, and their funding in music. The Swedish Arts Grant Committee are also an authority under the Ministry of Culture, and they work to promote and give artists possibility to develop their art, artistic development, and also to support innovative culture projects. Another mission of theirs is to analyze and spread knowledge about, for instance, the economic and social circumstances for artists. First of all, I would like to mention that Konstnärsnämnden has work scholarships that you can apply for. these work scholarships are there for you to make it possible for you as a freelance professional artist to concentrate on and develop your artistic work. And these scholarships can be used for living expenses, for labor, or maybe for renting a localities, etc. There are 3 different kinds of work scholarships. They are for 1, 2, or 5 years. The most common one I understand for musicians are the 1-year scholarships. They give around 200 scholarships per year. And the one that is for 1 year is 50,000 kronor. The ones that are 2 or 5 years are 100,000 Swedish kronor per year. So this is a possibility for you to support yourself and your living experience during a period when you are working with your artistic development. Konstnärsnämnden also has some funding for international exchange and travels, and they also have project fundings, project grants that can be applied for a limited experimental or development work, so some kind of innovative project that you're working on. This project has to be limited in time and also to have a very clearly stated goal. And you have to have a budget, of course. And here projects that involve collaboration are prioritized, but you can also apply for this if you don't have a partner in the project. Swedish Arts Grant Committee also have some artists' residence, and one is in Piteå, the Studio Acousticum, and they also have some in other countries, and I've mentioned a few here, as you can see: Canada, United States, Senegal, and Poland. Kulturbryggan, I will mention very briefly, is a part of the Swedish Arts Grants Committee, and they work as an alternative or a complement to other public funding, and they primarily support and fund cultural innovation and development projects in Sweden. The Swedish Performing Arts Agency, Musikverket, they are also an authority under the Ministry of Culture, and this arts agency is a center for cultural heritage and cultural life within music, theatre, and dance. Like they say, a platform for the creative human being. So there are different departments at Musikverket. One is Musikplattformen, which is the one that distributes grants to musicians, to music projects. We will go back to this in a minute. I just want to mention that the other departments of Musikverket, they are Scenkonstmuseum, Artist Museum, the Music and Theatre Library, the Electronic Music Studio EMS, the Archive for Old Swedish Songs, and Caprice Records. So going back to Musikplattformen, the department that delivers funding to projects. So the purpose of these grants, these contributions, is to promote different kinds of music to audiences throughout the country. And the projects that involve renewal, innovation, and high quality are, that's the core, renewal and high quality are core criteria for the grants. And Musikverket, the Musikplattformen, also prioritize free music life and musical diversity, as well as children and youth perspectives. They also have this mission with gender equality and diversity, which are special focus areas. They should also contribute to international and intercultural exchange and cooperations in its activities. So When you apply for funding from Musikverket, you should know that your project have to be a collaborative project, which means that you have to have at least one partner, and you also have to show some kind of co-funding from another party than Musikverket. It should be innovative, some kind of development project, and it should be of high quality, and it should definitely result in at least one, or hopefully more than one, public meeting. So this innovative collaborative project you can apply for as an organization, institution, or authority in Sweden. So this was a lot of information about these three big authorities on a governmental level. And just to give you a recap, let's look at what is different between these three funding authorities. I have put it here both in Swedish and English, as you can see, just to make it really clear. So the Swedish Arts Grant Committee, Konstnärsnämnden, they support individual musicians or practitioners with various forms of scholarship and grants. So here the applicant can be individual, and the money can be for your living, to use for your living expenses. The Arts Council, the Kulturrådet, on the other hand, supports free groups that have an organization number. They also support different organizations and regions with different kinds of operational grants and development grants. So here the applicant has to be a legal person with a Swedish organization number and also a plus or bank giro. At the Swedish Performing Arts Agency, Musikverket, you can apply for funding for a project, and that supports different organizations, institutions, and authorities. So here the applicant, again, or the project owner, must have a Swedish organization number. You have to have a legal body and also a plus or a bank giro. So this is basically the most important things that differs between these three organizations in terms of who can apply for the funding. There are some other Swedish foundations that are of national interests and that have cultural funding. The first one, which is a big one, is Postkodstiftelsen, the Swedish Postcode Foundation. Here you can apply for project funding if you are a registered NGO, a non-governmental organization, and if you are active in any of the fields of human rights, nature, environment, arts, cultural, or sports. The project that you apply with must have Swedish relevance and serve some kind of public interest, and it has to be connected to any of the UN's sustainability goals. So they are aiming at supporting projects that can create a positive change in society. Postkodstiftelsen, they support, they give you support from the foundation to build up your idea, and they help you with the application through the applications process. And if you are awarded money, you also get a project manager to support you during your construction of the project and implementation. And the average project support they grant are 2 million. So this is maybe not something that you start with in your career, but it's a very good possibility if you are aiming for a bigger project. Another Swedish foundation that gives grants to culture is the Allmänna arvsfonden. It's the Heritage Fund, and they award money to innovative and developing projects that help strengthening children, young people, and people with disabilities. So if you're a non-profit organization or some kind of association, for instance, you can receive money from the Heritage Fund. So if you have an idea with a project that uses cultural music to help strengthen any of these groups that I mentioned here, this Allmänna arvsfonden is a possibility for you to apply money, and they are also very helpful during the application process, according to my experience. There are A couple of fundings I will just mention. Längmanska fonden, they contribute to art and literature, and you can seek this money here if you are a private person, individual, as well as an organization. And support is given from them to specific projects and not ongoing activities. I will also mention Folke Bernadotte's Minnesfond. This is aiming mainly at towards young people between 11 and 26, so maybe you are soon too old for this or already, but this is also if you have an exchange project with another country using cultural to promote understanding and peace in society. This is a possibility to apply for money here from Folke Bernadotte. There are also other kinds of foundations in Sweden, and you can have a look at these on this website, stiftelsemedel.se. So this was a bit about the bigger national funding possibilities. Of course, you can also go to your regional or local community to look for funding. There are cultural departments both in the regions and in communities. In the regions, you have the Länsmusiken, the regional music organizations, and they are, first of all, you might be hired by them at some point in your career to go on tour, because they do a lot of children and youth tours and also other kinds of concerts. But they could also be a good partner for you if you have a project that you want to go through with. So I encourage you to look for project funding in regions and communities. You can apply for cultural support for public activities and cultural programs such as performance, exhibitions, and concerts. And I think it might be easier for you to start locally to look for money, because people in your home community or home region might already know your name, and the connections are a little bit tighter, and maybe it's easier to get an overview and to get in touch with people. The distance might be shorter. So I encourage you to not forget your regional and local possibilities for funding and for support. There is some very good Nordic funding available within the Nordic politic corporations, Nordiska rådet and Nordiska ministerrådet. The first one here is Nordisk Kulturkontakt. At Nordisk Kulturkontakt, they have some mobility support that you can apply for as a professional artist to support your travel and staying in Nordic or Baltic countries. This support, the mobility support, can be used, for instance, for collaborations with colleagues in another Nordic or Baltic country. It can be used for touring, performances. It could be used for exhibitions, as well as if you want to participate in a conference or a meeting in one of the Nordic or Baltic countries. There is also short-term and long-term network support, which is for collaboration and exchange of knowledge and ideas between artists in the Nordic Baltic countries. And there is also specific project support for culture and art productions that develop expertise in the art field. The second one mentioned here, Nordisk Kulturfond, they work for innovative and dynamic art and cultural life in the Nordic region, and they want to stimulate the development of arts and cultural life in the Nordic region as well as in a global context. So here you can apply for project support for Nordic cultural projects that are innovative and of high quality. They also have some startup support when you are in the starting phase of a project, and they also have a support program that's called Pulse, which is for Nordic festivals and concert scenes. International support. Let's have a look at what's available within the European Union. Creative Europe. This is the culture program for the EU, which runs from 2014 to 2020, so there is a new culture program coming up very soon in the European Union. So Creative Europe is a funding that provides support for international cooperations between actors, parties active in the cultural and creative sectors. And a collaborative project consists of a project manager and several project partners from countries participating in Creative Europe. You cannot be a private person to apply for this funding. It's only legal entities. It has to have one project manager and several partners, that is countries. And usually I would say this is not the first grant you are looking for, because it's quite complicated, according to my experience, to work on this. But in the future, it's a very, very good possibility. There are lots of money involved here. Another European Union funding that is maybe a little easier is the Erasmus Plus funding. Some of you might have used this when you have traveled on exchange studies within Europe. So Erasmus Plus is supporting with mobility support. Either here you can be an individual, you have to be an organization to apply for this money, but it's a little less complicated than the Creative Europe application. So here you can apply for money for mobility in terms of developing your skills or continue your education or make specific study visits or other kinds of experience exchanges between cultural workers. Within the Erasmus Plus program, there is also a funding for project collaboration, and this is in terms of strategic partnerships where you develop different projects, development projects. And in Sweden, the contact organization for the European Union for Creative Europe is Kulturrådet, the Arts Council. So, and they can also give a lot of more information on this and help you out if you have questions, if you want to try this out. Other international support possibilities could be the other funding possibilities that might be worth looking into, or at least remember in the future, is the bildningsverksamhet, the studieförbund. In Sweden, I don't know if there is I've tried to find an English translation. It's kind of a grown-ups education organization, but I couldn't find a very good word for it. But the Swedes, you know what it's about. So here it's possible to get money to arrange your work as a studiecirkel. But the studieförbund are also a very good partner in different kinds of projects that you could like to do. You could, of course, look into other scholarships, and I mentioned the website already before, stiftelsemedel.se. Swedish Church could be a very good partner. There are scholarships at the Musikaliska Akademin, the Musical Academy. I'm sure you know about this already. Of course, you might be interested in looking into sponsorship and philanthropy, which is not very big in Sweden yet, I might say. More broad, but this might also be a possibility. And of course there is the crowdfunding that I'm sure you know a little bit about already. Finally, but very important, what should I think about when I apply for money? Well, here are some recommendations for you. First of all, read the instructions for the grant and the application very carefully, so that you have all the facts when you start. Make sure that you know who can apply for the grant. Is it me as a private individual, or do I have to have an organization, a legal body? Is there any need for a partner? Is this supposed to be a collaboration project, or do I need some kind of co-financing? Are there specific criteria, objectives regarding the form or outcome of the project? So be very thorough when you read the instructions. It's also worth checking out if you can get some kind of support from an administrator in the application project. There are, like I already mentioned, some of these funding givers that also help you out through the application process. So don't hesitate to contact them to ask if you can get help if you want to. It's also an idea to check out projects that have already received support before to see if you can get ideas or tips. Musikverket, Kulturrådet, they have examples of projects that has received money. When you write your project application, be sure to formulate it as concisely and clearly as you can. And you don't need to use very specific or difficult words or phrases. Just try to be concrete and simple and clear. That is usually better. It's important to think, I think, of to be concrete when you specify the purpose of the project and how you plan to implement it and what kind of results you expect. And also, I would recommend you to review your project description several times and make sure that you have provided all the information about what your project is about, and so that you also have included that how and when and where and why you want to implement it. One way to be very thorough is to test your idea or project formulation on someone else and ask for feedback. I encourage you to really use your colleagues and your teammates, if I may say so, to get feedback and to help out in this process. It's also a little bit of a tip to, in your project description, use headings such as background and the purpose, objectives, which are the goals, how will you implement it, who are participating, to have a timetable of your project, and to be sure to have your budget there and the financing, of course. And speaking about that, make sure to be very thorough and realistic with the budget. And I think that you should also check out carefully if you are supposed to, or at least can, put your own salary in your project budget, because it's not that you should work for free. Also, an artist has to have money to work on a project. So don't forget that, to put your salary there. And also, of course, check if there are special attachments that are required in the form of, for example, CVs or maybe work samples. And start in time. Don't wait to the last minute. That's a very important issue, I think. Make sure that you have good time to go through all these the criterias and everything, and that you have time to rest a little bit, and then check your project application out again to see it. And one recommendation could be that you make an annual calendar with all the deadlines, so that you know during a year when is the deadline for the Konstnärsnämnden, when is the deadline for applying to Musikverket, etc., etc. And seek out various contributions and support. Don't focus on just one, but try to find some different kinds, and to make sure that you not rely on just one contributor or one funding body, but to check out and apply for money at several. And this might also be a way of finding partners. And last but not least, do not give up. It takes some time to get really good at project application. So just try again, and if you get a no, you might check out if you can get feedback and see what from the funders, and to see what you should improve in your application. Some of them give feedback and some don't, but you can always check and be persistent. So just rounding up with a couple of examples of project that has been awarded money at the Swedish Performing Arts Agency, Musikverket. And I will leave this for you to just check out if you're interested. There are several more on the websites of Musikverket, as well as Kulturrådet, so you can just check out for yourself to see if you can get some inspiration. Thank you for listening.